So we're here again at Rob Dahm's shop, and last time we were here, we're looking at all the cool things getting done, and one of them was his Pikes Peak car, and it literally wasn't just, it was a shell and pieces all over the floor.
Yeah.
And I told him, dude, there's no way you're going to get this thing done in time for Pikes Peak. Maybe you can plan for Pikes Peak next year, but there's no way this year.
Yeah.
But if you follow his channel, they actually got it done. They had it running. They had a lot of problems, but they overcame them all and actually put a decent time down, like 11 minutes, which is amazing for a 200 tread wear tire and the first effort, Rob. Like,
Yeah.
I was telling you that I've been there 6 times, and probably the car's broke half the time. And, you know, like, we're pretty experienced, and we're not even building anything as wild as this. And I don't even know how you made it.
A lot of things went right, I think, and honestly, thank you, because you were helping be a voice of reason and like a guardian angel, helping me know where I should be. And with your like, for you telling me, hey, set the tire pressure to this, might be something that's easy for you, but for me, I'm terrified. I've never been to Pikes Peak before, and I now have a number, and that type of thing is what kept me in the running, because that's exactly what we did. We set the tires to the pressure you said, and sure enough, that at hot versus cold, you know, and we can go through all the technical details, but it was nice having you and others guide me, and really that's, I think, the only reason we succeeded.
And I felt really bad because I wasn't able to help more, because it was my crazy busy season too, with Formula D prep, World Time Attack prep and testing, and it's all happening in the same 2-3 week period.
Yeah.
And
It was chaos for you, but
I mean, more chaos for you. Like,
yeah. But I don't think you know, when you watch the videos, you'll see we had bigger problems, like just getting the car running, or just, you know, we had an issue where the fuel system got zapped because somebody left the ground cable unplugged, you know, on the battery. And so we were dealing with some very basic issues that I don't think, you know, your skills would have been very helpful, but what you did was beyond helpful. So I'd love to kind of run through all the different things that you see, and not just what it is, but what we're trying to do. And this is what you see in front of you. I'll be honest, I'll start by saying this. I didn't care if I left broken rotors at the top of Pikes Peak. I wanted to make it to the top, and that's it. And yet here we are with a car that's got perfect compression, a billet engine I built poorly in less than 48 hours from getting it from the port, and the car's ready to go kick ass at another event. Granted, it looks a little rough.
I mean, that never happens. And you know, like, if you're watching this video, the technology behind this car is incredible, and there's so many cool things. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do this in a concise video. I mean,
rapid fire.
Like, so I guess a lot of people care about the motors. So this is like the awesome 3-rotor billet, and maybe if you can talk about it for a few minutes.
Yes. So this was honestly, when you talk about like scope creep, this was a scope creep item. I was going to rebuild my motor anyway, just to have it fresh for Pikes Peak. It was running. We pulled it out of there running.
It was just going to be a 20B.
It's just the standard all steel, all cast iron 20B. But I was thinking to myself, this car's always been front weight biased. What if I get a billet engine and you know, save I don't know how much weight? Well, it got held up in customs, and so it made it the week we were supposed to leave. And so over the course of 2 days, I've kind of blueprinted it, dry fit it, stacked it, took it apart and restacked it, and in the process weighed all of the parts that we were changing, and it saves exactly 35 pounds from the other short block. So this short block to short block is a 35-pound savings, which on this car, even though most of the engine is behind the front axles, that's still a very powerful benefit to the front of the car.
Now, I know in the last video that we did together, you're talking about how a billet engine grows a lot more than the iron one, and how you have to clearance it different.
Yes.
And like your rotor side clearance and tip clearances are all different, right?
Yes. So on this one, again, my hunger was greater than my logic, and so I prepared for that. I prepared for this engine to go to that, and so we actually took, I think, 2000s on each side of the rotor, the main ring. We took it down in anticipation. Overall, yeah, not so much the tips. The tips were already clearanced from before, but yeah, the overall ability for the engine to swell and not collapse onto the rotors, and I mean that seemed to be the ticket. It seemed to work perfectly.
And the overall like strength of the billet and the rigidity and like the fit of the dowels and all that is much better.
Yeah, let me grab a piece. So this is a Billet Pro, the insides of a Billet Pro plate, and so it's actually, I would argue that it's weaker because it's aluminum and there's tons of holes for, cooling. All this is a cooling passage now, where the steel one does have a lot, but this is incredible amounts of cooling. So I think of this as more not for peak horsepower as much as for a lot of horsepower, but
sustainable.
Cool. Exactly. So I think the style of plates, I haven't found their limits yet, but you've got these steel inserts right like that. But what I did is I didn't mess with anything. Instead of my 16 millimeter dowels on my other engines, I stuck with these 13 millimeter ones and then threw them in the CNC machine and matched the whole engine up and made sure all my bearings were in line.
What I could see even from here is the porting is way more efficient and aerodynamic looking.
Yes.
Like instead of making the 90-degree turn, it kind of just swoops in there.
CNC ported, not by me, by Billet Pro. And so I didn't mess with that at all. No hand porting. I want consistency. As we start getting into more of the motorsport stuff, I want to not think about, oh, this engine has this piece or this engine has this porting. It's, we get good at something and build off of it.
So what's always amazed me about rotaries is like the quality of the power band. Like a lot of people think they're like pipey, like two-stroke dirt bikes, but I actually found that the power band may be high, but when you're in the power band, it's wide, really linear, and
yes,
the torque curve is really flat, and it's a super awesome power curve. But I've never experienced like more than 2 rotors, so this must be like a tractor almost. Right?
I will. There's a hill I will die on, and that is that I think that the 3-rotor is the ultimate rotary engine. I think that the 4-rotor is emotionally the ultimate, but
sounds better.
It sounds better, but the 3-rotor weight to power. I mean, the 4-rotor makes so much useless power, relatively speaking. You have to actually try and come up with ways to use the extra power, and you've got extra weight and so on. The 3-rotor, the Billet in particular, I think is such a competitive engine, like in the lineup of rotaries, that has the best of all worlds because it's got that low-end torque with that extra rotor, so you can kind of get away with making more top-end power with the turbocharger because it's balanced out with a bigger engine.
And how much power and torque does your engine produce at what RPMs?
Yeah, so this one makes 1,033 horsepower at the wheels, and is either 600 or 700, maybe it's 700 foot-pounds of torque, both at 7,000 RPM.
Mm-hmm. And when does the power start coming in?
On this, on this car, it's actually pretty low for what I was expecting. You start seeing the power rush in at about 4,300 RPM.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But on Pikes, it was actually much worse, not because of the altitude, but because we had an undiscovered boost leak on the intake manifold.
Okay.
We had shortened the intake manifold, and I had resurfaced one flange, but the other flange was warped. And so we had issues where it just not, low end was gone. Under 4,000 RPM, it was anemic. And then it came online. I thought it was altitude, it was actually intake manifold problems. But yeah, this combination, this is a G45 1500,
mm-hmm.
and it seems like an incredibly properly balanced turbo to this engine.
Are you running a twin scroll exhaust?
Not on this one.
It's a 3-rotor.
On the 2 rotors, man, you really get the benefit of the twin scroll. And I mean, you can see it on the back pressure. You see the pulses individually, and it does. Your boost comes on so much lower. So I'm bummed out there's not like a tri-scroll.
Yeah.
Because those pulses are, that extra little oomph. You could run an even bigger turbo and have that better low end with the pulses. But no, this goes to a V-band. and puts in work from there.
And how much boost pressure are you running?
That's actually a really weird issue. This engine makes a lot of power at low boost. So relatively speaking, I made 1,033 of the wheels with 27 pounds of boost, which I was expecting it to be much higher, like 35 pounds of boost or so on. But then I remember this isn't just side ports, this is also semi-peripheral. So I've got 3 air inlets, really not restricting how the air gets in. So normally it's the intake the intake manifolds are very restrictive. In this case, it's a free-for-all. And so the turbo doesn't have, the pressure ratio is not as high as I thought it would be.
And you're running TurboSmart's E-Gate, right?
Yes. So that alone is kind of an interesting, controversial issue because it's not tested like to what people have seen over and over. It's not the golden standard yet, but my God, that thing is cheating. So cheating because on a traditional wastegate you have a space spring, and so you have ratios of that. And the problem is that if you want anything else, you have to tear it out and put springs in there. Mm-hmm. And so on the E-Gate, doesn't give a shit. The E-Gate does not care. It goes 100% open, 100% closed very quickly, and that's up to you to make it work as well or as poorly as you want. And so the only issue we had was that we accidentally angled the electronic gate, its electronics, towards the manifold. Mm-hmm. So we had it overheating by about 8 minutes into the run. And the impressive part is that it would overheat, we'd cool down, and reset. We overheat, so the thing can take a beating when it shouldn't be. But that's one of the things, we've moved the electronic gate out of the direct line of fire. So it lasted all of Pikes Peak run, but we were purposely dripping water on it. So just to make sure it would stay safe.
I know, like when we did a video on the electronic gate, again, the comments, people were afraid of the electronics durability, but then, you took it right to the edge of...
I know the limit of it, and I can tell you it can perform. And so, obviously...
And it recovers.
It recovers, exactly. I hurt my gate over and over again, where you would think, okay, it's locked up. No, it was actually the Haltech protecting it. The gate just is going to, beyond its limits, it's going to continue going until it can't. But the Haltech was saying, hey, you've hit 300 degrees on the sensor, open the gate. And so on my qualifying runs, I actually had no boost in the last 6 or 7 turns because of that. And so again, the guys at TurboSmart, they told us ahead of time, hey, don't put the E-Gate there, and we did, and that was on us.
Well, that technology is amazing, and I guess we're talking about future refinements. You could look at shaft speed versus boost too, and actually totally control your shaft speed.
That's something that when this turbo is in its efficiency zone, oh my God, this thing is just incredible. The G series compressors, particularly, there's technically, I think a lot of them are the same as the DTX series Gen 2s, but the turbine wheel just gets you up to speed so quickly and still flows. And so, like you're saying, I could definitely do a lot with keeping it up there.
And I don't even know where to start, but I remember telling you put twice as much heat exchanger as you think you're going to need, and that might be enough. And this thing probably has more heat exchangers than anything I've ever seen.
And it was barely enough. Now, it was funny because it was actually Billy Johnson who was stopping by for some other reason, and I was talking about potentially moving it back, and he was the one that really pushed me to say, you know what, getting this engine moved back is going to open up some opportunities. And really, it opened up opportunities for bump steer to go away because the steering rack is up higher in its proper position, and cooling. That was like, on any track day, I would do a warm-up lap, and that's almost actually the heat-up lap. And then by my hot lap, I was literally overheating. And so I could do it, but it was not enough. The radiator was 2/3 the size of this one. So we almost doubled it with the way it works out. It's more than 50% bigger than the old one. And then we added another side radiator and another side radiator, and then these 2 rear ones are oil coolers on each side. And one of these is the same size as my old oil cooler setup. So I have twice the cooling for oil and more than twice the cooling for radiator, and it was barely enough to make it to the top of the mountain.
And I mean, this engine's probably a good foot back from stock.
It's over 8 inches back for sure.
And the engine is completely behind the axle center line, right? So it's a front mid engine.
Front mid engine, yep.
And like, I don't know if you could really tell on the video. I mean, Rob made a lot of room up front, but every inch of that space is being used for a heat exchanger. I mean, you probably couldn't add much more of anything in here.
No, we used every bit of space we gained, and our goal was to try and keep it all back because of weight distribution, but necessity. Now, one of the things that's really different about this car since you saw it is that front cover is actually a dry sump front cover.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did I move the engine back, but I moved it down 1.5 inches. So, and we talked about that offline, was like, hey, let's get that center of mass low. And so my goal, move the engine down 1.5 inches and then lower the whole car 1 inch or so to try and keep that low.
I mean, this is so crazy. I mean, not even a year ago, we're at Grid Life and you're taking this on the track for the first time. It was sort of a well-built street car.
It was definitely a street car. It wouldn't overheat on the street. It was comfortable. It had all the interior. It was formerly a drag car, but at that point it was kind of a confused identity car, and now it is 100% race car.
And like, you did a lot of stuff like we talked about, like I remember telling you it's really critical to seal the wheel wells from an aerodynamics perspective.
Yes.
And it's something that people forget about all the time. I mean, there's so many things that's been addressed that people don't consider, like bump steer and geometry, and you didn't get a chance to build your trick knuckles, but why don't you show the one that you're working on?
So I was able to machine these the week we left, and these are solving all the issues that we have identified with putting the RX-7 suspension this low.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly it's a drop knuckle, so it sits up like this, and so instead of the center of the wheel being so close to the lower control arm, the control arms drop down, and so the whole car can sit at ride height, properly. So I think this is a full 2-inch drop. I didn't modify, you can see it from the backside, I didn't modify the RX-7 geometry from here to here. I just shifted the wheel up and then focused on making it stronger for downforce. Yep.
And then you're using a Corvette bearing system too, right?
Yep. So I know this very well from my Corvette stuff and the 4-rotor stuff. I adapted it to a Corvette hub, and it's a little heavier than the stock stuff, but it can take a lot of abuse.
And we're always talking about knockback being the problem on heavy aerodynamic cars, and that should probably kill it dead, I think.
Yeah. So I have it hub-centric on the inside ring of this. All 3 of those bolts are buried deep in, and then I really focused a lot on the brake caliper adapter and making sure that had all the rigidity for up to 2 G's of braking with the entire car's weight on just one axle. So I feel very good about this. It's overbuilt, but it's definitely my testing.
And then used AI to do iterative design and get rid of all the hot spots and FEA.
It's really funny because it looks like 2 chicken breasts right here and here, but that was my goal, is okay, tell it 3 G's of downforce and the entire car on one wheel. Also, I put it several, almost 1,000 pounds of turning force, of the rack trying to move and the wheel fighting it or hitting a bump. And then, again, it's all braking, downforce, acceleration. Like, I added all the forces I could all at once, and it took my design and really made it kind of wild. And so the only thing I did, though, is that its design had this whole section cut out. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do it, so I added this ring in just to complete the circle. I was like, that just doesn't feel right. I can't do it. And so before I cut it, I added the rest to complete the circle and keep all 3 bolts, centered to the piece.
I mean, I think that's what's powerful about, like AI is available to commercially nowadays.
Yes. Yeah. That somebody like me, I mean, it's expensive. Fusion 360 is expensive, but expensive is different than not accessible, and that is definitely accessible. And at this point, what I have left to do is make the upper and lower control arms, and because one of the things that we got rid of was the amount of kingpin angle was pretty aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing, is that the RX-7 hub is really long. So it puts the kingpin angle out here, and the brake caliper does this weird thing. So having this flattened all of that and allowed me to really point that to have less scrub radius. But I got some work left on these. I decided, as much as I want these on the car for Pikes Peak, the car wouldn't make it at Pikes Peak if I focused on them.
But it's incredible, like if you have the right friends, the amount of engineering you could do to like a privateer project is, I mean, like what the factory dudes are doing.
It's so neat, like a lot of the articles that I've seen on MotoIQ long before I met you, it's just like, oh, that's how the pros do it. You really kind of open and expose that type of stuff, and that gives people like me. I know people watching the video are like, I can do that because of the stuff that you've shared. And in my realm, I guess it'd be the rotary, but I love that feeling of like the person doesn't have to have a $1 million race team to do
$1 million race team kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like what's cool is like a lot of the stuff that you're doing, like even aftermarket suspension companies don't really understand a lot of this stuff.
Oh my God, are you right about that? There is so many people that they've heard, or they heard from a friend, this is how it works, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, for sure.
And you're kind of like at the next level to where not only are you fixing camber curve, roll setter, and bump steer, which is kind of like what a lot of people know, but you're actually, getting better contact patch utilization with the correct scrub radius.
Yeah, that's so true.
And a lot of people don't pay attention or know about those things for some reason. But I mean, this thing's going to be so awesome.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people might look at the prototypish look of all this and think it's rough, but
yes,
they don't understand all the coolness going on here.
Yeah, it's almost sad that like the engine you don't see because it's underneath the stock intake manifold, or the exhaust manifold's covered in Inconel. Like all the cool stuff is actually like more my the whole drivetrain is just beautiful, but it's hidden inside this hunk of shit. And so the downside is out here in California, there's not that much moisture, and so all this stuff doesn't rust quickly. But it was our best intention to get it all powder coated once we knew it was the final version. Well, it's not the final version yet, so that's my excuse. So
that's what's going on in the engine compartment. That's just sort of scratching the surface on this, right?
Yeah.
Like, even V1 of your suspension, which isn't even that, is pretty trick, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna set this down, and I'm gonna tell you one of the most controversial things. One of the most controversial things that are on this car are actually in the back of the car, and that's when I welded and dropped the knuckles on the rear of the car. I took the stock ones, and I felt like it'll improve the contact patch, it'll improve the camber gain, it'll improve just the roll center overall. And oh my God, I mean, you told me all that. I put my money where my mouth is. A little riskier than I should have, but the car handles so incredibly well because it's in its operating zone, and that with the Ohlins shocks, that combination has been ridiculous.
I know when you're doing the knuckle, and then I was saying, I know you don't have time for proper solution heat treating, and that's a little sketchy, but maybe
shot peen it.
Yeah, maybe shot peen it.
Yeah,
but there's no time. Like it had to go right on the trailer.
Yeah, and I did. Actually, it was after your message on Instagram. I was like, you know what? That's probably a good idea. So I added fins. I added rigidity to it, and I mean, I believe that was a game changer for me.
Did you get a needle gun too and try to work the welds as you were building them up?
I didn't. All I did was I cleaned up the welds, inspected them for cracks, and we did that after race week, and no cracks, thankfully. So, but they're not the final version. Nonetheless, they're the ones that went up a mountain at speed.
Those are kind of scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it worked. So your welding must be pretty good.
It was a lot of material.
And you kept the gas flow high, I guess. And so you're running Ohlins TTX shocks?
Yes. So they're the TTX shocks. They're called the ILX series because they're inline IL.
The through shaft?
Yeah. Well, they have the reservoir on the shaft, and so they don't have the separate canister, but they are physically, the separate canister exists just on the body, and so
it's the twin tube monotube.
Right. Yeah. So they are the TTX with it in line.
Are they through shaft where the shaft goes all the way through the body? I don't remember.
That's a good question. I've literally seen these completely apart, and my mind's drawing a blank.
So is the gas? How high is the gas pressure?
Not that high. He's not got them set high, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, misquoted, but I know that normally they're like 10 bar or something like that. I think these are closer to 4 bar, 5 bar.
Okay, they're probably through shaft then.
Okay, yeah. So my guy Doug takes care of all that, and I annoy the shit out of him with asking him all the questions, but he has answers for all my questions, and so I'm very happy with how they're set up.
So if our viewers don't know, a through shaft shock, the shaft goes all the way through the body, so you don't need to have a bunch of gas volume to make up for the shaft displacement. And that way you can get away with the internal, external reservoir and run a lower gas pressure, because you don't build pressure differential across the valve so much either. So you don't need a whole bunch of gas pressure to prevent the cavitation. And your brakes are Willwoods?
Yes. So the Willwood came out with a racing brake that has a floating, I guess you'd say floating, rotor. They're not bolted to the hub.
It's like a lug drive.
Yeah, it's like a lug. And one of your biggest concerns for me was, hey, you're putting all this power and downforce into the car. You're going to have brake pad knockback because of the amount of force you're putting onto stock, stuff. And I can definitely say in the rears, where the racing, that you can see it by the gray calipers, the rear floating ones, never once had an issue. And in fact, just replacing the rears, these are the same fronts I've had for a while. Doing the proper rears, I gained, I want to say about 20% more braking force, because I was able to consistently dial in the ratio front to rear. With the stock ones, there was a leaky valve. One wheel would lock up, and that's why I went with the ABS. But with ABS off, I gained so much stopping force because I could rely on it consistently.
So you're running Willwoods, and then your drivetrain's pretty trick, right?
Yeah. So to be honest, one of my favorite things about this is the big logo on the side of the car is very emotional for me. Is that it's TP? That's kind of funny, but it's TIC Performance. And so TIC Performance saw I was in a situation, and they came up with the wild idea of saying, okay, I was saying something like, maybe we'll do a DCT, something where I'm not a professional driver. I want my hands on the steering wheel. I hover hand so bad when it comes to manual shifter, because it's fun, right? But that's wrong. Like, decisive shift, hand back on the wheel. But you'll see me, even on Pikes Peak testing, I still had the sequential shifter. I was playing subconsciously. And so the whole goal was have a transmission and have it air shifted. And it wasn't until the week of the event that we actually got that working. And I took the risk, and so that's exactly why I built the car. TIC Performance came on and helped me with the insane PPG gearbox, and I enabled the air shifter, and it worked like shit. It was so bad because my numbers, it's all tuning. How long do you cut power? All of those numbers were just so overwhelming to somebody that's never done air shifting before. And so thankfully TIC, PPG, a company called MME, they all came in and said, hey, here's the rule of thumb for these things. And overnight, the car became an absolute monster. And so the air shifting system, what I've realized is it forces you to have to drive more aggressively. Downshifting is easier if you're always pulling a negative G-force. Instead of oh, I'm downshifting as I'm speeding up. You don't do that. You either are speeding up or slowing down, and you only downshift when you're at neutral or braking. And so it made me a better driver, to be honest, because it needs decisive action.
So I guess if people that aren't familiar with the project, this is a Tremec T56 or Magnum transmission with a PPG dog box with a sequential shift conversion, which is really cool because you can just get your run-of-the-mill transmission and make it to a awesome race box that can withstand over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque.
It's a tank of a transmission.
And dog shifting and sequential, and then converted to paddle shift, and it's all like a lot less than like a Hollinger, for instance.
Yes, that is correct.
Like about half the price, right?
It's pretty reasonable. I mean, sequential transmissions aren't reasonable, but relatively speaking, and especially considering the aftermarket support for that transmission, the adapters and it can go into, if you have a car, like we'll say a Viper, for example, well, a Viper uses the TR6060, T56 Magnum, you could drop that transmission in. So where I love my Hollinger, but you're making adapter plates.
Mm-hmm. And for a differential, you're running a Ford 8.8?
Yep, Ford 8.8 out of a Explorer. So it's an aluminum body, independent rear suspension, clutch type, limited slip, nothing too crazy there.
Well, what kind is it? Is it OS or?
No, it's like when I tore it apart, it's like a traditional clutch pack on each side.
Is it the OEM limited slip? Dude, we need to talk to OS and get you a proper one. And then we could do some tuning, and I mean that's way more speed that's just on the table. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I can tell you right now, the only two I've experienced with are this style and like a helical, and I wasn't expecting it when I first felt the helical. I was like, oh my god, this engages differently mid-turn than a clutch type, and I thought I did something wrong to the car, but I realized it has some strong benefits and drawbacks. It's just a different style.
The OEM helical gets kind of crazy with this power level too.
I believe that.
It'll probably blow apart in a few minutes also. But
wow.
And for engine management, you're running Haltech?
I absolutely love the Haltech on this. Oh yeah, Haltech is the correct name. I say Haltech, and they even made a video about saying Haltech. So yes, it's a Haltech. It's the R5. Now, I used this car before as an example of why you could use the R3. So the Nexus series of like smaller or better and best is kind of the way. But I wanted the R5's logging capacity. It's got like a gigabyte of logging, and my logs, like for example, I was showing you earlier, my run up Pikes Peak, which is from the moment of turning it on in the pits to the moment of turning it off as it's overheating after the finish line, was 12 minutes of runtime. That was 277 megabytes of data, and that's exactly the size of the R5 or R3. So I wanted to make sure I could have that log saved and then come back down, and so that's exactly what it did.
But what I like about the R5 too is your PDM is built into the ECU.
Nice. So nice, and that allows for really rapid prototyping, because with the PDM, you short out a wire, like I'm being very brutally honest, you short out a wire trying a new circuit, it doesn't blow the car. It just says, hey, don't do that. And so, for example, you'll see that red line running through the car. Mm-hmm. We added that 3 days before the race, and that's a water injection system. It's actually meant for water meth for in the intercooler, but we used it as a sprayer. Well, I ran a wire from the R5, ran it to that, and it's one of the few wires that are not covered in heat shrink, but that sort of stuff where I can just rapidly add a circuit instead of running another relay and another fuse. That's incredible.
So those of you that are watching that don't know, when we say PDM, that's a power distribution module, and conventionally your car will have this box with all these relays and crap in there, and when you're building a race car, that can become a big mess. But it is. A PDM is just a programmable unit that it stands for power distribution module. So it just gets the power, and you can distribute it any way you want without having fuses, without having relays. and all the parameters for load and you know what it could switch off, and even timing and stuff can all be programmable with your laptop. So
incredible.
It makes wiring of your car a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, and a lot easier.
Yeah, and the logic of your car, like if you have the traditional setup and you want your fans to turn on, you somehow have to get data to that relay to say, hey, turn on. Well, inside the PDM, it's all in there. So there's no extra wires. It says, hey, I say, hey, turn the fans on at 185 or 190 or 140 or whatever, and it automatically does that. It's the logic inside of a Haltech is incredible. And let me grab one. I have an R3 just to show people what that is. Yeah, so this is actually the R3 out of this car, and you can kind of see the R5 is about that much bigger. It's just slightly this, but magnified. And the only reason I took this out, like I said, is that it just has less logging. You get a lot. This is probably my favorite value for ECU. And like you were saying, you plug ground and power into this, and then out of a lot of these, you can send 25 amps out of each of these 4 pins, and then 8 amps out of a lot of these without, and it's also the whole ECU for the car. So yeah, incredible stuff.
Yeah, so it's like a game changer when you're building a car. Everything is cleaner, simpler, easier to troubleshoot, easier to set up. Pretty amazing.
Yes.
And you know, like PDMs have been around for a few years, but they're usually a separate module, and now you can get both in one unit and make it even simpler.
Yeah, I have all 4 wheel speed sensors going to this thing, or it was going to this one, it's going to that one. All 4 shock level sensors going onto that, and sampling at 1 millisecond, so 1,000 times a second, I'm seeing level data all being recorded to this unit. And so, I think it's a game changer for people at my level.
And you're also running a user programmable ABS system,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So that thing actually got mothballed during the Pikes Peak run because I had a problem with one wheel speed sensor, and I never got the proper chance to fix it. But that is the Continental RSX ABS unit, and that thing is incredible. And so again, that's another thing where on my run, it was full manual braking, tilting, or not tilting, but a full manual braking and Wilwood's, brake biasing. And I was just looking at wheel speeds, seeing when the rears would lock up to adjust that. But that unit, I wish it was working. I wish that one, it errors out because it's got one hell of a job, keep you safe, like braking. It's directly responsible for braking. And so I decided to disable it for the run because I couldn't get it working during the week.
I mean, like what I like about this over the Bosch Motorsport one is, one, it's a lot cheaper, and 2, the Bosch Motorsport one, you're stuck with kind of preset programs.
Yes.
And you got to hire some Bosch dude to fly over to your place if you want anything different. But this is fully user accessible.
It's incredible. It's almost overwhelming because you do put in, okay, what type of brakes, the radius of the hats, where the brake coefficients, all that stuff. And it helps. Where's the weight distribution? It's got a G-force meter that you try and place as centered to the vehicle as possible. You calibrate that, and it has steering angle sensor, which is working, and so steering angle. It has front and rear brake pressure sensors, all 4 pressures. It's got so much data to help you brake faster, and you can do a lot with like the live rear and doing a lot of like trail braking type of things, tuned within the software.
Wow. So you're running a dual master cylinder Wilwood pedal assembly?
Yep.
And their balance bar?
Yep.
Do you have like the knob where you can adjust on the fly?
It's right in there.
Oh,
the
okay.
blue knob, and it was nice because I had set that up completely wrong, thinking like conventional knowledge isn't correct on braking. And so, like I said, is that I went down the street, slammed on the brakes until something locked up. If it was a rear tire, clicked it forward, more forward, until I got it in that nice zone where it had just enough rear that I could kind of do a nice little trail braking feel to it, but still have stability at high speed. And so that's right where I left it.
for your paddle shift, are you running a air pump and the air tank?
Yeah, the funny part is I feel like I'm one of those guys with airbags on the car. You know, you hear them, and then bing, you know, and the pump kicks back on. Thankfully, the rotary is so loud, I can't hear that pump. So I don't, I'm not annoyed by that sound. But yeah, that's all in the passenger seat. A pump and a more or less expansion tank, you know, a reservoir, high pressure tank, keeps it at 10 bar, so 140 PSI. And you can see each shift. I've wired that to the Haltech as well. And so you see each shift use about 5 to 10 PSI.
Oh, wow.
And then after a couple, it kicks it back on. And so my goal was, this is a very close gear ratio. Let me go from first to sixth to first. Because on those hairpins, you get those straight breakaways, straightaways, and then back to another hairpin. So first, all the way up to sixth, back all the way down to first.
Aerodynamics is critical for anything like this. And so this wasn't any CFD or anything. It was just kind of common sense. And
yeah, and also, to be honest, part of it was, let me get the biggest thing they have type of move. I was like, you know what? I've got the power to push some heavy aero and heavy drag. Let me just throw whatever I can at it. And I think that I didn't bite off more than I could chew, but I have the biggest wing that APR makes. And I don't know if I didn't believe them, but it makes a lot of downforce. And so when we had the front bumper off, we didn't have the front setup proper yet, but I got up to 130 miles an hour in this car. And with just that rear wing on there, the whole rear was squatting about an inch, 0.95 inches, and the front had lifted a tenth of an inch. You know, not. I wasn't accelerating, and I wasn't hitting the brakes. I was right, just holding the pedal there, counting for all the bumps. And so on these shocks, these springs are, I think we ended up making 1,300 pound per inch springs. Do the motion ratios, ends up being 1,400 pounds on the rear of the car. And so that wing is brutally effective. And now I had to think about how do we balance that in the front.
And then we were talking about the wing probably needs more adjustment because even at your minimum trim, it's probably still like pretty close to stall almost.
It's certainly doing a lot of work. So I just sent, what you can see behind us is at what would be a 0 degree angle based on the end plates. It was actually stuck at a 3 degree angle when I did that test. And so I didn't get a chance to at least even back it off this much.
I mean, you could probably back it up like this much difference.
Yeah.
Even if the wing's completely flat, it's going to be making quite a bit of downforce.
That's so nuts.
Still, and you know, like it's probably maybe 4 inches from that.
Yeah. It's insane. I think we have enough room on the stands to go a little bit further, but you know, every kid's dream is having a wild, and this is where you're going to come in and tell me that's not the right way to do it. But everyone dreams of having super aggressive aero and just maximum nasty. But obviously, that's not the right way to approach it, right?
Well, no. I mean, this might actually work for Pikes because the air is so much thinner. But like, if you want to do time attack later, that's probably not going to let you balance the car right. And it's going to be super draggy.
And I think the people watching the video, I think they need to hear what you've taught me off camera is just because you have a big rear wing, that's not the goal of aero, right? Like there's a balance. And I guess my question is, if you got this massive amount of downforce in the back, reasonable amount of downforce in the front, what do you think is a ratio for the average person saying how much downforce front to rear?
You know, it should probably be maybe only not as rear biased as you think.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's what seems to work out for other cars. But to be honest, I've never done a car with quite this much power.
Okay.
I mean, we've run 1,000 horsepower 2Js, for instance. I mean, 1,000 horsepower, but the car was actually faster at 800 with a smaller, more responsive turbo.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
But, you know, like the rotary doesn't have that problem because you can make exhaust gas volume
quickly.
So, I don't know, it should be fun once you get ready. I mean, I'm totally down to help you, and we'll make this sucker fast. All you time attack dudes out there, you better be very afraid because Rob's coming.
Thankfully, I'm also driving, so you guys are safe.
So the aero is pretty basic. It's like a full flat bottom.
Full flat bottom. We do have over off there. Those are my 2 front diffusers.
Those are the Professional Awesome ones,
They are,
right?
yeah.
Professional Awesome, the big front diffusers.
Yeah.
The rear is the simple guidelines that I was talking to you about
Yep.
stuff, right? Like the 10 to 12 degree.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's pretty basic, but I mean, you can go really far with just getting the basics right.
Well, I think your original intention of guiding me, saying, hey, get the car lower properly, the ride height on this car was incredible. Like, we did theatrically bottom out at the finish line, but that's such an extreme moment. I kind of, based on your guidance, was like, you know what? We can either try and make that moment work better, or have 99% of the run be damped and run smoothly and keep it low and aggressive, and then at the end just hang on. And that seemed to be the trick. And even so, I might have erred on being a little too soft. But
didn't the half inch make a really big difference?
Lowering the car, it was just under half. It was right about half inch, made a huge difference. You could feel it. You could feel the aero working. I mean, this is without a doubt. Even without me being a professional driver, anybody could jump in this car from then till now and tell a difference aerodynamically.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's been my experience with this kind of car that 12 millimeters is night and day, and like, it looked like the car was kind of tippy-toey, so that's why I told you to give that a shot.
And lowering the center of mass and all of that, I didn't change roll bars from that point. So a lot of misconception, I think, for me as a beginner, is like, oh, stiffer roll bars and all that, which has its place, but just getting the mass lower, like, the car rolls right. Like, it was a nice feeling, but it felt flat. It felt like I had put really stiff roll bars on there.
Well, the thing is too that if you get your roll center locations okay, you're or close to stock, you're increasing your geometric anti-roll, so you don't need gigantic sway bars. Like, some race cars still have them, but usually race cars have a lot of race car stuff going on.
Right.
So the bars have to be kind of far away from the suspension. So you notice, like, a lot of times you see those Speedway Engineering bars, they're like yay big and they look huge.
Yeah.
But you notice that the arms are like this long.
Right.
So when they're that long, I mean, they're probably not any stiffer than stock, really, depending on what wall thickness you run.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, like, when you have your geometry all correct, you don't need big bars to control all that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'll tell you what, one of the things since you and I last, were here, is I think I was expecting, okay, I'm going to go to racing school to learn how to build the car better. That was my goal. But I think hands down, learning rally school was one of the greatest things, because on a normal street car, you don't understand the effects of weight transfer as much. And roll weight transfer, even though the weight's transferring without the roll, but the roll kind of dampens it. Like, you just don't understand that stuff until you can do it over and over again. And rally seems like the most incredible way to learn cause and effect of loading up the front, unloading it, loading the side. Oh, what an incredible sport to then learn how to tune a car on the tarmac even better.
Well, you know what I think you ought to do is actually go to Taka Ono's school, that Drift School USA.
Right, okay.
And then Taka's teaching method is way different than anybody else's, and I think it's superior because he teaches weight transfer from your most beginner when you're doing donuts.
Yes.
He teaches you the effects of weight transfer on doing donuts and figure eights at the most basic level. So you fundamentally know how to transfer weight.
Yeah. And
he also teaches you how to drift, even in third gear with 100 horsepower cars, like with totally stock engines, like an A86 with a stock engine with 70 horsepower, or an S13 with a stock K24 that makes maybe 100 to the wheels. And so you really learn how to weight transfer, and then, like, by the time he's done teaching you your first day, instead of being terrified of going sideways, you're like going, and you're tired of being patient, letting the car build up angle before you do something. And
yes,
he teaches you how to move the weight around the chassis. And I think it'll make you not be afraid of sliding at all until you get into triple digits, maybe.
And I think that's what people like me need, is that, you know, there's a lot of theory and a lot of practicality, but, you know, this car has to go very fast to test it, and you have to be really good as a driver to discriminate what, you know, okay, was that, you know, the kingpin angle, was it the caster, you know, like cause and effect. But I think that I felt like drift would be in that same realm of understanding that stuff at a much slower, much less risky speed, and then building up from there.
Plus, it's really fun.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all super fun to do. Where I think sometimes, myself included, people get caught up into just that little bit faster, and you forget to have fun. But I will tell you what, this car, there's Robin Shute and Paul Gerard, when I was at base camp at Pikes Peak, they both said, you're not going to make it up the mountain. They didn't mean it negatively. They just said, it's 91 degrees here at 10,000 feet elevation. This car's going to overheat. So they recommended that I not go for top speed, and on all the straights, lift and coast. And there's a moment, and you can actually see it from my head cam, where when I'm lifting and coasting, I'm not actively driving. You know, I'm passive at that moment. And so I was pointing at fans, and you can see them losing. They just got so excited because I wasn't driving. I was, you know, having fun with the people there. And my God, did that make that drive so much fun? I haven't had that much fun driving. I don't think ever. And you know, you think of Pikes Peak as a terrifying, intense thing, but when you have a brief moment to just enjoy it, oh, it's one of the most incredible drives.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
It's terrifying from, you know, I'll tell you what I think. This is controversial. I don't think the people driving Pikes Peak, I don't think they're as brave as we all think they are, being one of them. And the reason why is I think you're so optimistic about the situation, and you're so fixated. You don't notice there's a cliff. You're not looking at going, oh yeah. You're so fixated, and you know you're not going to crash. You just know you're not. I think it's more that everybody's got a screw loose. They don't see it because, honest to God, going down that mountain, terrifying. Because I don't know that road. I don't know the lines. I don't know anything. And I think the other thing is that when you're constantly increasing in elevation, the car is loaded. You know, you don't get that sensation of going over the roller coaster hill. And so I think that you just feel more planted than you normally would be. So I think there's a couple things playing. I don't think I'm as brave as people perceive me to be. I think it's just fixation.
I know Daiyo Shihara told me that he has stuff to do, so he doesn't notice
I believe that.
any of the things that that you're not supposed to look at.
There's one turn I saw Reese Millen do where there was no guardrail, and he just effortlessly went to the edge. And I was like, man, I want to do that turn like that with my mom watching on the live stream. And so I got close to the edge, just letting the car kind of track out. And it's not until you watch the helicopter, you're like, oh, that's what I was doing. I just saw the white line, and it's just, okay, let me just have fun with that. It wasn't until after my hands got sweaty.
Or you take a tourist drive up there in like
That's
a rental car.
That's scarier.
I mean, I know, like, we had our team, and you know, our team wanted to go up there to see what it was like. So I had all the guys jumping in the rent-a-van, and one of the marketing guys from one of our sponsors jumped in, and he got so terrified that I had to let him out, and he just sat there for about an hour while we went to the top.
Up and he came back down?
Like, he could not go anymore. He said, pull over, and I was making fun of him. I thought I was joking, but he was terrified, and he was like crying, and I go, oh shit, this guy's getting traumatized.
Yeah,
so
not good.
But I had to let him out.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's scarier when I went up in a van, but in a race car, you know, this car is not. It's enjoyably compliant, but it's a firm, you know, car comparatively, and so you're going where you want to go. The car's not giving you this roly-poly feeling, and so you just don't. It just leaves your mind that the risk is there. To be honest.
One thing about having the proper roll centers is the car is less sensitive to tuning, so you don't feel your sway bar adjustments as much. You don't feel spring rate changes as much. And you don't feel shock changes in the transient way as much. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that makes it more consistent.
And then the shocks are more, you do feel, bounce and impact and bottoming out, things like that. You still feel just as much. But as far as oversteer, understeer balance, then as your geometry becomes more correct, the actual weight distribution and things like that become more important.
Yeah.
So this thing sucks down a lot of ethanol. So what do you have for a fuel system?
So I will tell you, this used exactly 10 gallons to make it from the ground to the top of the hill. So for 12 minutes of runtime, I used 10 gallons of fuel. It made every bit of that worth it. Now I have a Fuel Lab single 1100 liter per hour brushless pump, and we ended up frying it because, like I said, when you have brushless pumps, they have controllers, and one of the guys had used this car's battery to pump up a tire on our trailer, and it just wiggled loose, and as a result, the ground cable to the battery was bouncing. And so when I jumped in the car on one of the test days, my voltage was going anywhere from 12 volts all the way up to 20, and I was like, and that's what I was seeing. And sure enough, that fried the controller for the pump. And so we ended up using 2 Walbro 525 Hellcat pumps in the interim. But that one pump used less than half the current of those 2 Walbros, so way less wiring, way less problems. It was an incredible pump, so they're fixing it right now.
That's the same pump I'm going to run in my GTR.
Okay, so the one thing I will tell you right now, that single pump will overpower this size of a fuel pressure regulator. You really have to tell the pump, it's got the PWM signal, 0 to 100, 5 to 95%. You really want to use that because otherwise you need a much bigger pressure regulator because it'll just overpower it.
I wonder if the Nissan has control. I'll have to ask the Cobb guys.
Yeah, so that's something. I have a massive fuel pressure regulator on the 4-rotor, and that lets, like for mechanical pumps, where they just make tons of fuel pressure. And so something this size, Fuel Lab is wanting you to pulse that pump. And hey, at low RPM or low need, really low pressure, when it's bypassing, do low flow, and then ramp it up as you have boost pressure.
Are you running stage injectors or single injectors?
Staged injectors. I'm doing this really fascinating. So right here you can see the fuel rail for the primary injectors. These do all the adjustments per rotor. Any sort of like transients, all done on these because they're the closest to the engine. My secondary injectors are up here, and those are, the way I did it mathematically, these go to the semi-peripheral port and the other port. So they make up 2/3 of the airflow. This makes up 1/3 of the airflow, and sure enough, the injectors are sized that way too. So I try to, as low as possible, I try not to stage them. I have the primaries running at idle and little baby tip in and making all the adjustments, but as soon as I can, I turn them all on equally. And that gives me the right amount of fuel in every unit of air is the intention.
And I know, like in the How to Build Rotaries video that we did, you're talking about trying to get the volume of fuel in there quickly to avoid some of the problems that I saw in my short-lived rotary tuning history.
Yes.
And so stage injectors are probably about the only way to do that, right?
Honestly, because having those massive, in my case, 2,600 cc per minute ID injectors allows you to have a much shorter time to inject that fuel. So over the 360 degrees of every rotor, there's some no-no zones. And so having the bigger injector with the correct airflow lets you really just get that fuel in at the right spot. Otherwise, if it's a small injector, you just have it on the whole time, and up to 15% on a semi-peripheral engine can be ejected right out the exhaust, and you never use it in the combustion.
Or you find the no-no zones like I did.
Yeah.
But you're running the big, like the 2200 cc on your primary and your main injector?
No, so I'm running 2600 cc's on the semi-P and the second port together. So that one injector injects it to those 2 ports, and then the main injector is a 1700 cc.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of ends up working out that the ratio is close. I have on my other cars, I run 1300s and 2600s, so it really is, you know, a third and two-thirds. But on this engine, it makes so much power, I had to upgrade or get another whole fuel rail. So I had to have a tertiary third inspector gauging, and I didn't want that. I didn't want all that complexity. So I raised my base pressure up this 4 bar, so 60 psi base pressure, and then upgraded my my primary injectors, and so I make 1,000 horsepower with only 6 injectors.
Man, what kind of fuel? You run ethanol?
Yes. So the containers are all around here, but 1-ethanol R when I'm doing something this critical, because I make a lot of weird small mistakes, and so that fuel really is my insurance policy. I stand very strongly behind it, because I'll run like regular pump ethanol on all my cars, not the 4-rotor, but I'll run it on like my FC or the rotary Corvette until I need to do something worthy of that fuel. Mm-hmm. And so dyno days where I'm really trying to get saucy and try something crazy, or going up a mountain, you know, repeat, you know, it's not just the race day, it's the whole week of just going up that mountain over and over again. That 1-ethanol R is where it's at.
You're running a radium fuel cell, or?
So I'm running a Fuel Lab, it looks like a radium,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's a Fuel Lab QSST.
Okay.
And it's a fuel-safe fuel cell, so I think they're made by
Probably the same people.
Yeah, it's all the same people. But it's weird because there's so many companies up in Oregon. I don't know why fuel cell companies are up in Oregon. That's their thing. You know, that's a local tradition. But yeah, that's a proper FIA certified fuel bladder, fuel cell, and then the Fuel Lab QSST on it.
And you're running anti-gravity lithium?
Yes. And so the video that we just recently launched, I show that battery actually got cooked from the bottom side from the exhaust, and it warped it, but it kept going. But that anti-gravity, there's a blessing and a curse about having a lithium battery. The blessing is that you lose all that weight, right? The lead acid, 40 pounds or so. This is 12. The problem is now I can't really, moving it doesn't do much. Instead of where the heavy batteries you can ballast, this battery, it's too light.
And I guess there's certain rules about lithium that you can't violate.
Yeah. And so they were particular about it, and we have it's in its own enclosure, and that that kind of double mounted of sorts.
It's a Mealy battery box. Yeah, those are awesome.
It's so nice.
I think like what makes the anti-gravity good is like other lithium battery companies, they have like a bunch of little batteries in there, and they're all wired in series.
Yeah,
but
right.
Anti-gravity uses pouch cells, kind of like a EV. So it's actually these pouches of the electrolyte, so they can pack more of that stuff into the case.
It's so much battery. It doesn't feel like it, and even their little like jump starters, you're like, no, that's not going to start. And sure enough, it does. And that's not even an ad. That's literally anybody that uses them is going to be like, that's not possible. It's just conventionally not possible. Now, one of the things you'll notice on this car is that I oversize the main grounds and powers because I don't have time to second guess anything. I know that alternator can produce 240 amps. That cable can support 240 amps indefinitely. And then anything I distribute to, I could totally downsize it, save some weight, but I don't want this getting 13 volts, this getting 14.6, and not sure why my injectors are acting up or whatever the case may be. Everything gets the same voltage, so I know when I'm logging, I know I'm getting the right thing.
Shoot, what else have we got in your car? I think we covered most of the cool stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, the oxygen tank is kind of a cool, but not really a big issue. I forgot to run it on the run, but I was in Colorado for a whole week, or a whole month. So I got really conditioned to the high altitude.
You're actually working out at high altitude.
I was
right?
too, yeah, because I was terrified that I would be disoriented. But my heart rate did not get up to my peak heart rate. I thought it would, because your new environment, terrified. It got up to 170, but my peak's like 184 or something like that. And so I was very happy to see that. One thing that I have that I'm really happy with is the fire suppression system. That is such a not me thing, but that is a very Pikes Peak thing. And so the whole Lifeline fire system, I've got the 2 sprayers in here, one towards the back, towards the fuel cell, and then there's a wire, I almost call it fire wire, where up on the A pillar, if it reaches 150 degrees Fahrenheit, the wire collapses, and so if I'm incapacitated and the car's on fire, the system, fires off. And so I've got buttons on the outside, which makes me feel like a professional race car, buttons on the dash, and the heat sensing wire. And so I'm thankful I will never have to test that, or hopefully never have to execute that, but that system works very well.
I mean, that's the thing about Pikes. Like, if you crash, at the minimum, help is 5 minutes away, probably. And it could be an hour away, depending on where you crash.
Yeah. They said it very eloquently that you're not only going to hit something, you're going to hit a lot of things, and more than once. And especially if you go off the road, you're traveling a little bit further. So.
And then, most places they'll just be you and spectators that are willing to help.
And they are. You can tell everybody out there is a car nut, and really has the raw excitement of like old school motorsports. I think it's still that kind of Wild West frontier, but I mean, at the end of the day, they still have an insurance policy, so their scrutineering is incredible. But it's still like it's not Willow Springs. Okay, let's make sure you got runoff space. It's a mountain road.
I mean, I think there's certain places. I mean, there's many places where there's not a marshal for over a mile. And then generally, even if the marshal can get to you kind of quick, I mean, you're going to be somewhere down somewhere.
Yeah. One of the most heartbreaking things I saw this year was not a person crash and then have their problems. That's on them, or that's unfortunate. But then there was a car that, there's always 3 cars going up the mountain. Once one reaches the top, they send this one. And so there's always 3 cars. And so I'm going to be brutally honest and say I didn't notice if they were waving red flags. Thankfully, they didn't, so I was correct in my observation. But there was a car behind me that blew its oil pan and whatever, and the car behind them got red flagged and had to come back down. Well, they started having car problems because they were halfway up their run. The car was heat soaked, and they were like, "Hey, you ready to go again?" And they went and they hurt their car, and it was like, that's so sad because they were, had they just been able to do their whole run, but the thing that a lot of the people say is like, the mountain decides. And the mountain was kind to me on race day.
I think I told you that.
Yeah, I think you were the first person. And then I started hearing when I was there, I heard that, and I was like, it's the truth.
I mean, no matter how good you think you are and how well prepared, the mountain decides whether it's going to let you win or not.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, literally, you can go from a 90-degree day to a blizzard, and if they release you and it turns into a blizzard, you're not going to do a good time no matter how good your car is or how good you drive.
Yeah, we had two of the test sessions were closed because of a blizzard on the top of the mountain, and it was just whiteout. And I'm like, you told me about that, but the first 2 days of like one first week testing and then the first day of the race week, I was like, this place is beautiful. There's what weather is there? Sure enough, the next day reminded me or taught me that, this mountain doesn't care.
Pikes Peak is the only place that I've been sweating, wet, and frozen all in the same hour and a half.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
Well, I'm glad that you're still alive.
Likewise.
Remember, I text you every day. Are you alive?
Yeah. You were making sure I was still there, and I was barely. Emotionally, I was dead, but the car and I made it back down in one piece. And you know what my favorite thing was? Piss revving the car like a moron to the crowd on the way down, showing that this engine and everything, whatever we did, I don't understand how, but it was still working on the way back down. And so I was just shooting flames out the exhaust and just letting people know we did it.
I think, next year when there's time for more refinement and more tuning and more dialing in, I mean, you're going to be a minute quicker.
I firmly
easily
can see that. The car, for sure. I've got to be able to drive that level, but I want to believe that I could. So Yeah, it's definitely. I know in my heart when I go back to Pikes Peak, assuming no weather or just freak engine blow or whatever, between this car or the 4-rotor, that I think I can take the crown from Mazda's official record. I feel very confident in that.
And I just think it's an amazing effort. I mean, I started my daughter's race car build about the same time, and it's still a pile of parts.
This was desperation, though. It wasn't just like, it's not just the positive, like, man, I would love to build a race car. It was, I am going to look like a complete moron and a failure to the audience that already thinks I'm not good at what I do if we don't make it up respectably.
And I think like a lot of those armchair guys go, yeah, Pikes Peak.
Right.
And they don't know how grueling, hard, and heartbreaking it is. And even the highest levels of pros get messed up, and manufacturers spend millions of dollars in just one shot to win.
Yes.
And I mean, I can tell you that, I'm kind of proud because we're the little Asian guys from Cerritos, and we've beat factory teams before.
That's so awesome.
But we've had our share of heartbreak and all that, and I mean, we've had 2 triumphs, and then the rest have all been heartbreak.
Yeah.
And like we'll work on the car all year, and just to see this come together in a few months. So if you think this video is interesting, go to Rob's YouTube channel. I'm sure all you guys know who he is because he's like 10 times bigger than us, but he's done a whole bunch of cool videos like showing the build process of this car and the trials and tribulations, and it's well worth the watch. Thank you, Rob, for letting us snoop around your shop as usual.
Absolutely.
And so if you need to buy parts, be sure and hit up our web store. If you like cool merch like my shirt, you can hit up the web store and get that too. And hopefully, and there's a lot of other things I want to cover. Like hopefully when we get to the track, we're doing some tuning.
Yes.
I'll bring Jeff along and we could do some of that suspension and dialing in, and really eager to see the 12-rotor and eventually the 4-rotor IndyCar. This is like your dream garage, and there's like you do the kind of content I would like to do if we were full-time YouTubers like you are.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a proof of a concept for all that stuff up there that I feel more qualified to take on the bigger projects instead of just being this loud guy. I want to have some proof that I care and that I'm trying, and I think succeeding at Pikes was a massive win for us, and I'm excited to kind of our shared future, taking these things and making them go even faster.
Yep. And like if you don't know Rob's channel, you might want to watch it, because I know a lot of our fans, we get a lot of the people that are always annoyed at the car YouTubers, but Rob's the real deal. I mean, he's probably smarter than us, and he's doing real things, and that's why we hang out with him.
Yeah, we get along very well.
So until next time, Rob, we'll be looking at some cool stuff, and Jeff is mad because we probably used up all his cards.
Yeah, batteries are gone. Yep.